since 1969, when someone told me I was a transport planner, I've called myself a transport planner ever since. But listening to my co-speakers, I think I'm one of those people whose life has been a miserable failure. I quickly worked out that in fact most of the effective planning I could get involved in, which interested me, was at the local government level, the street level, the streets where we live and move and mix and talk and so on. And that's how I ended up in what we were calling local area traffic management. More of that in a moment. My aim is to remind you that there was a past before all these millennial hot ideas like road diets and streets not roads and traffic calming and so on. I'll be throwing a lot of names at you. I won't have time to tell you much about these people, but I'm hoping that you'll be encouraged to do a bit of your own reading. You can start with Google if you like, because they're all there. But there are other sources, of course, and I'll be mentioning some of the books. And if you get hold of the books, that's what you get. Even though I'm bellowing it with my best French voice. Hello, back row wave. Yes. Robert, thank you, Rob. Good on you, Rob. Well, Rob's got terrific hearing in your ear. Right. What I'm going to be covering is, first of all, streets not roads isn't new. I want to talk about how the distinction became integral to street design and traffic management practice in Australia, and take a quick look at the origins of all this, and then a few questions for you lot who are in the early stages or mid-career. It's going to be more problem. Well, it all started last year at the ITE-ANZ conference. One of these characters from North America that's on the world circuit, you know the sort, plenty of slides, and lots of talk about, urban design is the flavour of the month or the flavour of the decade. Urban designers know more about streets than we do, and one thing you've got to know, fellow engineers and planners, is that it's streets, not roads. Looking down at you, and I felt him looking at me, and I'm thinking, what? I've heard this before. Max, you were there, I was there, who else was there? 1976 Perth. There's special sessions run by the local government committee at ARB on the appropriate design, mainly, of local streets. We wanted to stop building airstrips through our suburbs. We wanted to create streets that were more amenable. 41 years ago. The focus of the papers in Streets on Roads, Streets Not Roads, was on street design and standards. The authors there spoke about design considerations including efficiency, equity, environment, lifestyle. I think this is pretty foreseeing stuff, isn't it? Another author spoke about what he called the socio-technical factors and aesthetics. Now, the basis of all this was our realisation that you can't apply highway design codes and expectations in living areas and shared spaces. We were being consistent with the dictionary definition of streets and roads. Do you remember this report, Max?
I do.
I used to keep trotting this out, and I was very embarrassed because Max used to read everything we wrote. And I said, "Here's another one, Max. I'm sorry, it's the same old stuff." And Max, you remember what you said? There's always a new audience. So here I am telling you lot 40 years later because you're a new audience. But seriously, street comes from Latin roots, from the word meaning paved. Watling Street, which went a long way, was nevertheless a paved roadway. We are using the term to mean a constructed place, a space. Road comes from Nordic Germanic origins, from the word which meant riding, to go somewhere, to head for a destination. So a street isn't just a road by another name, at least in contemporary Australian traffic management practice. Now, discussion in the 70s and 80s led directly to Jim Coleman's rather good report on streets for living. Jim Coleman was an architect that was engaged by the local government committee, if I remember correctly, Max, to produce this book. If you can find a copy of this, even better if you can get a copy for yourself, it's still worth having on your shelves. Right? Jim said the primary functions of an urban street must be recognised. The primary functions. And the design elements varied accordingly. He talked about, no, I'm sorry, I'm ahead of myself here. That's this fellow. Parkinson was saying the design elements must be varied according to how you see the primary purposes of the street. He talked about spirit of place, urban art, street furniture, vegetation, and so on. I'll bet there's not more than one or two of you that have even heard of this, never mind got a copy. Any of you know about it? One? Yeah, Mal, yeah. I've got it. I'm carrying it with me now. It's precious. But it's a remarkable document written by an engineer who was doing wonderful things down at the Shire of Flinders and ended up at Doncaster and Templestowe where he produced this. At the same time, we were starting to apply the same understanding to streets and traffic management, the same understanding that the design of streets had to be different from the design of roadways for traffic. And I won't go through these in detail, but the sorts of things that we were getting into were, we were looking at street functions, road hierarchy, what does it actually mean, streets as multifunctional spaces, and the recognition that even arterials have frontage activity associated with them. We're talking about the need for an environment of care at all levels of the hierarchy. There was, during the 70s and 80s, there was a rapid expansion of research and practice in what we were calling still local area traffic management, which was, we discovered, was proto-traffic calming. I'm coming to it, Rob. And we were learning from practice in Europe, particularly in the Dutch shared space in residential areas. Now, implicit in all this was an understanding that traffic links fall into two broad categories, traffic routes and what we were calling local streets. The distinction between the two types of road for traffic management purposes was explicitly stated in the first LATM guide, the NASRA 1988 version, which actually took most of the 80s to prepare for various reasons. In essence, roads on which most of the LATM toolbox was not appropriate, and the rest. And the rest, it turned out, was a pretty large part of the road network. But we were aware that this needed qualifying. Loader and Bailey, was one of the many innovative things that they did after I left, was to devise the limited arterial. The arterial road on which some degrees of restraint were appropriate because there were other things going on. And they were looking at the roads through the Bayside area at the time. We were realising that a strict two-class road system wasn't realistic because mixed functions are found at most levels of the road hierarchy. And that was what behind our thinking when, at the prompting of our friend Mr. Morgan up the back there, a few of us got together in what was truly a remarkable symposium, we can call it, Rob, during a happy hour at the Darwin conference in 1990, art conference. And there were a bunch of us around, maybe there were others other than Rob who were there, can't see in our hands. And we came up with a way of placing LATM within this wider context of what we were being told was traffic calming. Because Rob didn't like it being called traffic calming, he wanted to bury the whole lot. We found a way of actually explaining what traffic calming might mean, and we were trying to understand what the non-engineers were saying to us about what needed to be done about traffic in towns. The Darwin traffic calming matrix made it clear that LATM, local area traffic management, is only part of the matrix. And I won't go through this in detail, but look at level 2 traffic calming. Level 2 is actions to restrain traffic speed and lessen traffic impacts on corridors and traffic routes, especially through activity centres. That is, these are the roads that need street treatment. They might be district roads, might be even sub-arterials, but they need some degree of street treatment because there's things going on there other than traffic. 27 years ago. Okay? Now, merging the design and traffic management strands on such roads produced a remarkable and probably now neglected sharing the main streets. Produced by Hans Westerman, based on research on how people and traffic behave in shopping streets and other sorts of areas like that. They developed this report. Hans and I workshopped this around Australia, and as it went on, I began to realise how good it was. Did any of you attend those workshops? A couple of hands here. I don't know if you remember anything about it, but they were great fun for us, and I learned a hell of a lot from Hans. Hans, by the way, was an engineer planner in the European mode. He was well educated. He had a well-rounded education. He talked about type 2 road environments, which are roads where both traffic and frontage functions are important. He said the quality of the road as a space can be expressed in amenity and convenience, heritage and character, and the appeal as a place to meet, do business, and for special events. That used to be able to be downloaded free from the RTA website, the old RTA New South Wales. I don't know if it still is. Try searching on Sharing the Main Street, see if it's still there. And if you can, grab it as a PDF because it's worth having in your electronic library. And today we work with resources that you probably take as given, that are implicitly and explicitly based on streets and not roads. The Austroads LATM guides, the OG Guide to Traffic Engineering Practice 10, superseded by Guide to Traffic Management 8, GTM 7, Activity Centres, another one of these great, marvellous books that no one ever reads. I wrote it. I poured out my own song. The Monash series of traffic engineering practice and now the traffic engineering management. And the latest one is a whopper. I mean, doorstop, wonderful, wonderful. Try and get hold of that. Andrew O'Brien and I even mentioned type 2 roads and streets not roads in our contribution to the 1999 ITE Traffic Engineering Handbook. So there we were telling the North Americans about it. So it's rather galling when one of them comes back and tells us this is what we're doing. And during the 90s, shared zones were introduced into the Australian road rules, 10k traffic speed, cars to give way to pedestrians and so on. So in summary, there is today a widespread recognition of the multi-purpose nature of urban streets and the need for a holistic approach to their design and management. However, this isn't a latter-day discovery by urban designers wanting to put traffic engineers right. So, much to you, Mr. Valeria. Where did it all start? Well, my generation of the 60s and 70s would say it would be with the accounting report. It's actually a report ostensibly by a committee under the guidance or at the request of the UK Minister. You can still get this book. Go on eBay and buy it for about $215. Right? And I think libraries have been throwing it out. So if you see one of the a book table at a school fete, grab it. There's a lot in it that most of us have never actually read, but there are some very strong essential themes in it. Buchanan said there's a strict relationship between the quality of the urban environment, amenity he called it, the freedom given to motor vehicles, accessibility, can they get to where they need to get to, and the personal and community costs that we're prepared to pay. This gave rise to two things which had far-reaching impacts on our practice. Environmental capacity of streets and areas became very much a focus of attention for about 10, 20 years. Don't hear much about it these days, but I think it's still highly relevant because it's actually implicit. It's an undercurrent in a lot of the reactions we're now getting from the design professionals. And I'd love to be about 20, 30 years younger so I can get back in there and say, yeah, look, we've got the tools to analyse this. And the other concept he came up with was the idea of a town is like rooms and corridors. The rooms are the living and activity spaces, and the corridors are the roads that we need to get from one side of this town to the other. You don't wander through the middle of a room where something's going on. Like if someone was to wander through here right now, we'd say, what the hell are you doing? So we separate the activity spaces from the movement links. And this was very much an undercurrent in traffic in towns. Buchanan, I might say, was unfairly painted as a pro-car engineer. In his later years, he was still out. In 1989, in a paper he wrote for the chartered engineers or something in England, he was talking about the car's effect on the growth of cities. He referred to, quote, the car, that bloody dog, that Rottweiler on wheels, that brute, which given half a chance will scatter bricks and mortar far and wide. Obviously, petrol. So I'm here to bat for Sir Colin. I think he made a great contribution. Now Buchanan produced the book, but it hadn't started with him. It says it there. But look at what goes on before him. And there's some names up there I'll be mentioning: Unwin, Parker, Alcantara, New Towns and all that. Can't dwell on this, but I used this a few times in some of my papers. You'll find it all over, for what it's worth. I just want to use it as a map to indicate that there was a whole complex, a history behind what we've taken on today as accepted and understood basic principles. Buchanan himself acknowledged Sir Herbert Alcantara, 1942 or 43, whatever it was. He produced a remarkable little book called Town Planning and Road Traffic. Remarkable because he was a cobber, and a yachtsman, and an artist, a well-rounded policeman of the London sort. He was Assistant Commissioner of Traffic in the Metropolitan Police. Right? He says the primary objective is road safety. Proto Vision Zero is by the sound of it. Road safety at all costs is what he was basically saying. He then went on to say we should distinguish local streets from arterial roads. There should be no nondescripts. One thing or the other. And then talked about the need to create residential precincts. Well, there's a good word. Probably one that you've used a lot in your own careers. Well, I fumble. Do I have time for some of these? Oh, I'm heading for the end. I've got some wonderful quotes from Alcantara. In traffic matters, a pinch of practical work is generally worth a bushel of theory. Right? The abiding trouble is that everyone in these days thinks himself a born traffic expert. Well, ain't that the truth? Just try it at a party, just tell people who you are, what you do. Tripp in turn followed a whole bunch of people, going right back to the beginning of UK and then eventually American planning practice. Again, I won't go through this in close detail. Ebenezer Howard wrote the book on Garden Cities of Tomorrow, I think he called it, and that led, he encouraged Unwin and Parker to develop the first model village, New Year's Week near New York. You can go there now and have a look. People's all from York, there it is, which provided the model for the first garden city, Letchworth, which led eventually to the new town and Canberra, early post-war Canberra neighbourhoods. Then Raymond Unwin, in 1909, was credited with first drawing attention to the need to distinguish between traffic routes and local streets. More than 100 years ago, colleagues. Okay? So there ain't anything new under the sun. And in fact, the British Town Planning Act in 1909 institutionalised that distinction, introduced the idea of secondary roads. In America, Robinson had a book called City Planning with special reference to planning streets and lots, and again started to introduce some of the elements in local planning that we became familiar with. A fellow called Longstreth Thompson in the UK wrote quite a good book on site planning in practice, and again he talked about the principal function of residential roads is to provide access to the houses. If the primary and secondary roads have been arranged properly, there will be no inducement for through traffic to make use of minor roads. Nothing new again. Which renders it possible to employ narrower carriageways and lighter construction than would otherwise be possible. Isn't that interesting? Then followed all that lot, Radburn, New Jersey, you probably know about, an attempt at complete segregation between pedestrian movement and traffic access. Never the twain shall meet was their philosophy. And Clarence Perry's model neighbourhood. That looks familiar, it looks like a neo-traditional black, doesn't it? Well, that's their model for neo-traditional black. Now meanwhile, back at the ranch, the Town Planning Association of Victoria, in their submission to the Metropolitan Town Planning Commission, said a sharp distinction should be drawn between arterial roads, business roads, type 2 roads, and residential roads. 1923. And many more examples could be cited if I had time. Thus, as long as 90 years ago, many of the elements discernible in modern network guidelines for local planning and traffic management were already demonstrated. Now, these foundations bear recalling from time to time because they not only hold basic truths, they remind us that nothing is new under the sun, and we're professionally arrogant if we ignore the past. You know what they say about people who ignore the past. Some questions for you to ponder on. Is all this historical stuff now outdated, irrelevant? Is it wrong, in fact? And we start with a clean slate. Is the no road hierarchy philosophy correct after all? Should we positively be designing for mixed traffic environments? I'm inclined to say yes. That's something for you to resolve. Will the problems of living with traffic be solved by other means? What's going to be the implications of autonomous vehicles, car-free cities, all the other sorts of controls and technologies that might be coming in the very near future? If all else fails, are engineers really the ones who can fix any problem? As was blatantly said in one of the early versions of the Victorian residential provisions. We'll do this and this and this, on engineers will fix up any problems that might arise. I still remember. What are the implications of all this for Vision Zero? And what lessons did the Wunner, for instance, teach us about mixed surfaces? Traffic and people and activity all going on at once. Well, we've had some lessons on that, and Max, if he had time, I'm sure would like to tell you about the improvements that we gained when we went from this to the motor car. What was it, Max? The casualty rate on these roads was much higher than we currently have. Well, there are the questions. The moral of all the story is that every generation